What is going on, guys? Welcome to Python for Beginners full course. This is lesson 3 of my full course program. If you have not seen lesson 2, here is a video up above. Go ahead and check it out before you look into this. Today we're going to be talking about something that's very important when it comes to storage. When we are storing data inside of our Python code, it is important for us to know how to read that data so we can have access to it. We're talking about databases and APIs, so we can build really cool stuff like our own weather app, or how to build our own Siri or Alexa. So that's enough intro, let's get right into it. I want you to notice from lesson 1 and lesson 2, I was writing in 2 different programs. The first one I was writing in was Replit, and we set that up during lesson 1. The second program I used last time in lesson 2, however, I was using something called PyCharm. I'm just going to be switching in between different coding environments so that you can see that we can be running this code in any of them. And so I'll show you different ways of coding in each of them so that you kind of get used to that. Today we're going to be talking about something called indexing. Indexing is the way that the data is actually stored inside of your variables. So this is indexing. I'm just gonna make a little note. And indexing has to do with your variables. So I'm going to create this variable called sentence, and I'm just going to store a string in there, just some kind of sentence such as SalteeKiller is my teacher. If I did a little surgical operation on my variable sentence, I could open it up and inside it would be storing this data a little bit differently than what we think. We know that when we print sentence and hit run, it should just print all of that data over here. Right? SalteeKiller is my teacher. If we were to take a little bit of a deep dive into there, it would look like this. This is not valid code or anything. But I'm going to say at index 0, we have that capital S. Index 1 has this A, 2 has L, and it keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. And a lot of people don't know this. It will even store the spaces as well as any punctuation. So if you have periods, commas, question marks, it would also be stored in its own what's called an index. So coming back to our print statements, yes, we can print the entire sentence, but let's say we wanted to be a little bit more specific. When I put square brackets next to my variable, I'm going to put an index number to say sentence at, let's try that S. I said that S is at index 0, so let's see what happens when I run this. There's that capital S, because sentence at index 0 has S stored inside of that. So each of those boxes is called an index. So this A will be index 1, index 2, index 3, so on and so forth. So ask yourself, which index number is K? Well, let's see. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's try 6, and there's that capital K right there. I said the most difficult thing about counting these indexes is just remembering that we need to start counting at 0 instead of 1. Of course, naturally, we want to start counting at 1, but when it comes to computer science or coding, most of the time we start counting at 0. So let's say I wanted you to print out this R at the end. Well, that would be a lot more difficult, and it's a lot more prone to incorrectly counting these indexes. So there's this little shortcut we can do. I can just say -1, and look, it prints out that R. What's happening is, remember from our last lesson, our compiler is reading your code left to right. What this minus sign is telling your compiler to do is actually read this backwards. So that's what the minus sign is doing, and then go -1. -1 brings us right here, and just kind of imagine your cursor. So you can see to the right of that is the R, so that's what it prints. Many people do argue that I think this should be -0, because if this first letter is 0, shouldn't this be -0? That does make sense at first, but -0 is not a number. And so what minus does, it just brings us to the back, and then if we wanted to go -1, then our cursor is right there. Whatever's to the right of that cursor is what it's going to print. So if I want that H, what index number would I like? -3. So here's the minus sign, 1, 2, 3, and there's that H. So that's a nice little shortcut in case the thing that you want to print out is more towards the back of the data. So that's how you index when it comes to a string data type. So I'm going to comment this print statement out, and we're going to talk about just one more data type called a list. if you remember that from our first lesson. So I'm gonna call this heroes. Heroes equals a list. Remember, a list has square brackets and you can list many items inside. I'm gonna say Spider-Man, comma, Ant-Man, comma, Vision, comma, Wanda, and I'll just do one more. I'll do the Hulk. So indexing, it's going to have the same syntax, so I can print heroes, and of course that will just print my entire list of heroes up here. But if I wanted to be more specific, like I was up here in the string, I can use that same square bracket syntax and I can give it a index number. So ask yourself, what would happen if I put 0 in here? Is it going to print this S, or what do you guys think? Well, when it comes to lists, these are actually stored inside of the variable a little bit differently. So before we had a string saying there's the S and the index 1, we've got the A, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to a list, it's actually storing each item inside of each index. So each item per comma is going to have its own index number. So at index 0 will actually be Spider-Man, index 1 will be Ant-Man, so on and so forth. Okay, so you don't have to write this part. This is not valid code. So if I do heroes at 0, hit run, now it says Spider-Man. Now if I wanted to print Vision, what index number should I do for that? Let's see, 0, 1, 2. So remember always to start counting at 0. Most of my students have a hard time remembering that. Usually they go 1, 2, 3, and it'll print Wanda instead, okay? Now if I wanted the Hulk, what index number can I do? Well, there's 2 different ways I can do that. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's try 4. Good job. And then there's also -1. So this applies the same way. This will go at the back, and -1 is right here. Whatever's to the right of that cursor will print out that last index number. So good job with that. So now I'm gonna give you a little bit of a coding challenge. I want you to look at the challenge I'm about to put up, and I want you to pause the video and honestly try this. If you try this on your own, you will really get the hang of this. And this is actually very important because you're gonna need it for accessing databases or APIs, or when we come to the for loop in the next couple classes, then this is gonna be a much easier concept for you. So I have a different variable. Instead of sentence, I called it string, and it's the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, which is a pretty popular sentence to use in coding. Now what I want you to do is I want you to write a print statement for each of these. I want you to print the E that's stored inside of the string. I get some students that try to do this, print E, and if they hit run, of course it prints the E, but that's not doing anything. I need you to use indexing. Find a way to index that E. There are 3 E's in here, just pick one, doesn't matter. Maybe this one because it'll be the easiest. And then I want you to print the X, that's right here, and then print the G. Once you're done with that string, head over to the list called party names instead of heroes, and I want you to print Salty using indexing. Then print Shreya, and then finally print whatever's the last name in the entire list. So in this case it would be Francis, but if I just added another member like Bob and just hit run, it should print Bob now. Then finally, if you're feeling brave enough, you can try this bonus. And it's just the same list, party names, and I want you to print the T that's stored inside of Salty. So we didn't go over this, but let's see if you can figure it out. Part of being a good programmer is figuring out these issues on your own or by teaching yourself. You can use Google and you can research if you'd like to, if you're feeling brave. And then I want you to print the A that's stored inside of Shreya, so this A right here, and then finally print the F that's stored inside of Francis in this list. So take a pause on this video, do this challenge, and see if you can do it. Welcome back, hope you did well. Now let's go over this challenge. Let's print that E. So print, and it's not sentence this time because sentence no longer exists. So now the string is called string. So I'm gonna do string with my square brackets, and I'm gonna count where that E is. So I'm gonna say 0, 1, 2. So that should be 2, and that printed the E just fine. Now I wanna print the X. Now the X is a little bit far away, and here's actually a little good way we can cheat with this. You can use a string function to find out where X is. So instead of counting all those, I could actually do this. I can do string.find, and inside of there, I'll say find the string of X. And if I hit run, it will tell me index 18. So let's do string at 18 and let's double check, make sure that's X. And there it is. Good job. Now we need to print this G. So a lot of people will say -1 at first, but -1 is actually this period. So we need to go one more, so -2. And there it is. Great job with the string. Now let's try the list. Party names at Salty. Okay, so let's print, now it's party names. So party names, square brackets, and Salty would be 0. So it's not 1, it's 0. There it is. And now I'm gonna print Shreya. So print party names at, let's see, 0, 1, 2. And some people ask me, can you use the .find for this? Not when it comes to list. We can actually do something else. If I wanted to print party names instead of .find is actually a string function, so it doesn't work with lists. But we can say .index and say where's the index of, let's say, Ellie, and hit run, and it should give you the index of Ellie, which should be 1. There it is. So that's how you do it for lists. Now print whatever is the last name on the list. So I'm going to print party names, and if you did 0, 1, 2, 3, yes, that will print the last one that's on there, which is Francis. I'm sorry, I wrote this wrong. Party names at 3. And yes, it will print Francis, but what if I added Bob in there? Well, guess what? It's still gonna print Francis. So I don't want it to print that. I want it to print the last thing on the list. So I'm gonna do -1. So whoever's last will be printed. So now it will be Bob, and if Bob is ever taken away, then it should say Francis. So that is printing whatever's the last name in there. If you were brave enough to do the bonus, then good job with that. I want to go over this with you. Let's print party names. So remember, when we print party names, it's going to print the entire thing. I taught you before that you can be more specific by using square brackets to find that index number. So let's just grab Salty for right now, which is index 0. So this just got a little bit more specific than just party names, but we can be even more specific by grabbing this T. If you want to be more specific, you just do more square brackets. So right next to my square brackets, I'll do another set of square brackets. So let's assume that this is a string, and right next to it is going to be our index number. So here's the string. What index is T? Let's see, 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's try 3. So instead of Salty, now it says T. Good job with that. Now let's try the A inside of Shreya. So print party names at Shreya 0, 1, 2. I'll run that, and there's Shreya. Now let's get that A. So we can just do -1. So another square brackets, -1, and there's the A. Finally, let's do the F in Francis. Print party names at Francis is at -1, so I'll do -1, test that, make sure it's Francis, and let's be more specific. Let's grab that F. Remember, it's not index 1, it's index 0. So there is the F inside of Francis. A lot of people ask me, why would I ever use this? Well, again, this is good for loops, which is coming up in the next couple classes. But let's take an example of one of my other YouTube videos. This is my weather app that I built a few weeks ago. And if you want to check out this application, how to build a weather app, go ahead and check out this video up above. But what I want to get at is inside of here, you can see I'm actually using indexing. It's because I have this link right here. It might look a little bit messy, but this is essentially what's called an API. This is a link to a weather station's database. So inside of their database, they've got dictionaries and lists, and right here I'm trying to query those. So you can see my index zeros, and I've got these other square brackets. Now they're not numbers. You can see there's words in there. That's how you query in a dictionary. We'll talk about that later, but I'm just doing that so I can print whatever I want. And down here, I'm going to be printing those indexes. And so when I hit run and I enter some kind of city like Chicago, it will bring up whatever the weather is in Chicago right now. So this is in the database, and just by doing indexing, I was able to pull whatever's inside of their lists or their dictionaries, so on and so forth. So that's why this concept is very important, because if we want to use someone's database, we get to access some of that cool information that we otherwise don't have access to. So this is the end of lesson 3. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe and turn on the notification bar so that you know when my next lesson is coming out or my next tutorial. If you have any requests for my next tutorial, please let me know down in the comments, and I love taking suggestions. I want to make content that you need. I will see you in lesson 4. Thank you so much and happy coding.